You're watching JCT TV. This is Bible study for the 21st century. So today we conclude our four-part interview with DJ McPhail. DJ is the founder and pastor of the Liberty Churches of Johannesburg, South Africa, also Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and in the UK, and also in the United States of America. He's a remarkable young leader. Friend of mine, I interviewed him a few weeks ago when I was in Johannesburg, and you'll love the interview with DJ. And then when we finish that, we'll take a break and we'll finish our Bible study for the day, so stay there with us.
Everyone has a story. We'd love to hear about yours. Write to us and tell us about it. JimCantelonToday.com.
As you know, on JCT, I include interviews, but I look for interviews that will add value to your life. And in that sense, I've become a little bit exclusive in that I'm looking for men and women who have a track record in ministry and or are playing a critical role in the salt and light way in our culture and in our world. And so we've had some pretty outstanding interviews, and I'm not talking about the interviewer here, I'm talking about people I've interviewed over the past little while. DJ McPhail is no exception. I've known DJ for almost 20 years. He's a pastor of Liberty Church in Johannesburg, South Africa, and that's where I am right now, in Joburg, actually in a studio in DJ's church complex. DJ, it's very clear to me that leaders like you in South Africa, like Musi here in South Africa, have a lot to teach the world because, as you know, with the last few years' immigrant crisis in Western Europe and also in parts of America, out of Mexico, there's, I don't know if it's xenophobic, but there's definitely stresses and tensions there that I think are being reacted to in a very immature manner. What I pick up here in South Africa, through the furnace of much affliction, you become much more mature when it comes to dealing with immigrants. Maybe someone like you needs to write a book someday. You mentioned the UK. Let's just shift gears here a bit.
Yes.
Someone listening to this interview right now said, well, UK, I thought you said South Africa. Well, the fact is that you have been expanding both in South Africa and other parts of the world.
Right.
Tell me about that process, how it began and where you're at.
Right. So, we believe that the best form of evangelism is church planting, not crusades. Crusades can gather huge numbers of people, especially in Africa. We can take great photographs and we can send them back to our donors from wherever they are. But next week, the JWs move in, the Muslims move in, they go to the same things, they get given things, they arrive. You know, Africans, what I love about Africa and South Africa, black Africans are the most courteous, hospitable, kind, generous people you'll ever come across. So if you get invited to a Christian crusade or a Muslim crusade, of course I'll come because I'm in relationship with you. Why would I do you the discourtesy of saying no to your invitation? The best form of evangelism is church planting. So our strategy, apart from what we do in justice ministries in Africa, is we want to plant churches in the most densely populated Muslim cities of Africa. Because of urbanization, cities in Africa are growing, they're exploding. We want to be there to preach the gospel and to plant churches where people come to know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And so we started off in Dar es Salaam, and the church there is doing fantastic.
That's Tanzania.
That's in Tanzania. In Nairobi, in Kenya. And we have plans for other cities in Africa. Now, you can only plant churches as fast as you can raise leaders and teams. And in a technologically saturated world, it's amazing these days. You actually, to plant a church, you need a church planter, you need a worship leader, you need a children's minister, and you need a technician.
Right off the top.
Right off the top.
Yeah.
You need someone who can do production, can beam in services, can get everything happening in terms of technology. That's the world we live in. Young people are connected through technology and through media. And so you need those four to start. So it takes a bit more, and we want to start churches as strong as possible. So that's our strategy in Africa. And then in Western Europe, we're in England, and we want to start planting churches in Europe, because with immigration being such an issue in Europe, Europe has never been sociologically this fragile since the Second World War. There are undocumented immigrants in their hundreds of thousands in every nation of Europe. Well, we can complain about this. The United Nations, as far as we can see, there's no solution. And so as the Church of Jesus Christ, we've got to preach the gospel. There must be a reason in God's great economy, in God's great design, for people who don't come from traditional Christian backgrounds, like Muslims, to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. I believe that before Jesus comes again, we've got to see the Muslim curtain come down, and this is our opportunity. We need to grab it with both hands. And by the way, when we plant churches in Europe, when we're touching lives of people who don't come from a Christian or Western background, is can we preach in such a way and disciple in such a way that you don't have to be Western to be Christian.
A very remarkable evidence of your strategy and your commitment to the very thing you're talking about is, for want of a better term, a safe house ministry.
Right.
In Bulgaria.
Yes.
Absolutely amazing what is happening there. DJ, tell us about it.
So we know the great challenge in our world with human trafficking and with human slavery. Bulgaria is, I think, either the second or third most trafficked nation in Europe. And so we want to create a safe house where young ladies mostly, but not just young ladies who have children, once they're rescued out of human trafficking, have a safe place to be healed, to be discipled, and to be trained with skills to re-enter society with the ability to earn money, so they don't have to revert to trafficking or to being trafficked. And this is a tough one.
Ooh, yeah.
It is tough, but we've made a start, and I'm so proud that a church in South Africa, with all our economic challenges, with the weakness of our currency, we've been able to fund a house in Europe, because we're convinced that once we get one house going with the quality of what we've built and the staff that we've employed, and with the couple, Grant and Peter Ann, who lead it, we'll have access to funding, and to other churches from Europe helping in the safe house. And this is the first one, we believe, of many. So we're not involved in the rescue, we're not involved in the prosecution of the perpetrators, we're solely involved in recovery and healing and reintegration into society.
And you're already developing quite a profile. I mean,
yes.
Grant and Peter Ann, who head this up for you, are involved in a number of committees and conferences, highly regarded, highly respected by the secular authorities in terms of their proactivity vis-a-vis human trafficking.
Right.
it's a real credit to them and ultimately to you. Let me just shift gears again. There's no doubt that you are seen because you are as successful in ministry. A lot of young guys look up to you. I think increasingly I know you're in demand as a speaker all over the place. Momentum is a remarkable thing.
Yes.
But can momentum also hurt you? I guess I'm asking, we've seen people in races that either get too much momentum and they lose their balance and they fall on their faces because they're going too fast.
Right.
How do you manage your success? And how do you, if you will, discipline yourself from that biblical injunction to not think of yourself more highly than you ought to think? Now, I know you're a very humble guy, but just for the sake of younger leaders out there who are listening to this interview right now.
Yes. Well, as you can see from my genes, I spend a lot of time in prayer.
In prayer. Or else you just need a donation. Very contemporary. Young teenagers would love this.
Yeah. I wear clothes that I'm comfortable in. But Jim, I have a phenomenal wife, Karen. And Karen is so rooted. If I ever get wind of my own importance, she's right there to give me perspective, and I love that about Karen. Also, we have a phenomenal leadership team. Our vision team, which is our eldership, are incredible men and women. Pastor Theo, who's I think an incredible apostle, and he would cringe if I called him that, but he's a phenomenal leader and pioneer and apostolic ministry on the continent of Africa, who's got a huge passion for Muslim nations in the Middle East and Europe.
Thousands of churches.
Oh, thousands of churches.
The guy's amazing.
Phenomenal. So I take one look at him and I'm thinking, man, I'm not doing anything, Also, you're on our international advisory board. And so our international advisory board is to have statesmen, men and women like you and Kath, who can speak into our lives. And if ever our leadership feel we're going off at a tangent that is not consistent with our vision, is inconsistent with the scriptures, they have access to the International Advisory Board. Dr. Paul and Carol Alexander, Mark and Christine van Straten, Martin and Ross Steele, who lead a great church in Auckland, New Zealand. So we've got this team around us. And I was nearly going to say a cloud of witnesses, but they're still here. But I think, you got to have people around you that have access to you and can love you enough to tell you the truth even when you don't want to hear it.
Now, when we talk about success, in my view, the most successful thing you've ever done and are doing is loving Karen the way you do and raising some remarkable kids.
Yes.
That to me is number one. And your kids are all serving in ministry with you.
Yes.
Was this something you had hoped would happen, or has it just sort of happened?
Karen and I, we were both first-generation Christians.
Yeah.
In the ministry, we saw pastors' kids, and man, we weren't impressed. Because if you preach the gospel, which is an incredibly powerful message and positive message, and you don't live that at home, the disconnect can be picked up by your children immediately. And so we made a decision we would never force our children to go to church, and we'd never encourage them to go into ministry. It would have to be, again, a high sense of the call of God, a call from God, because it's their journey. I don't want them to live under our shadow. My eldest son was once offered a position in the United States as a youth pastor, and I said to him, pray about it. He didn't want to even pray about it, He's got a tattoo of Africa on his forearm. So he said, Dad, I'm called to Africa. I said, yeah, but pray about it. Maybe you need to step out from under my shadow. He said, what shadow? And I love that because I don't want anyone growing up in my shadow. And so by God's grace, all three of our children served for many years and are now in ministry to one degree or another. Some of them have side businesses and things like that, but they love Jesus and they love serving his church.
Something I've noted, Kathy and I both have noticed about your kids, is they love each other and they really love you and Karen.
Yes.
Like really, when we see you all together, it's just kind of like one big party.
Yeah.
It's a climate that you have created that to me is a powerful model. I got about 3 minutes left, DJ. How do you maintain your own spiritual edge?
For me, you mentioned success a few times. I don't think I see myself as successful as you see me or others may see me. For me, success is just obedience to the next thing that God says. That for me is success. So am I being obedient to what God is asking me to do next? And that step of obedience always involves faith, putting my trust in God knows what he's doing better than I know what I'm doing, so I need to trust him. And it's as simple as that. And so the older I get is I need to manage not only my time but my energy, which requires me to even be more intentional investing in other leaders who can do what I do, maybe even better than I do it. So I stay at the coalface of what God is really calling me to do in this season of my life. And by God's grace, God's always been able to help me with this. He's given me the grace to be a very unthreatened leader. Because I was a first generation Christian. I never saw myself as a leader. I've been really a reluctant leader in God's purposes. And so when others have stepped forward, I've never wanted to be a lid. And I think that's really helped me invest in others quickly, release them quickly, and raise them quickly. That's had some of its challenges, but I'd rather be on that edge than being a lid on people and keeping them down when God is raising them up.
DJ McPhail, thanks so much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Jim.
Jim Cantelon Today is a program dedicated to the teaching of the good news of Jesus Christ. This all through the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. JCT also brings to you encouraging testimonies and stories from Christian leaders all over the globe. If this program has added value to your life, would you please consider becoming a partner? To do so, simply contact us by phone, mail, or online.
What I'm about to look at with you now, verses 34 to 40 of Matthew 22, are some of the most important words in all of Scripture. They're echoed in Mark and Luke, and I don't want to give it short shrift. So I'm going to do a few minutes now to the end of the show, and then I will pick up on this next program, because I just don't want to rush through this. But first of all, let's read it. In verse 34, when the Pharisees heard he'd silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him, that is Jesus, a question, testing him and saying, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind." Mark says, "and with all your strength." This is the first and great commandment. A second is like unto it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Whoa, this is so important. The Pharisees grudgingly were impressed that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees. In the Greek, it's muzzle. He had muzzled the Sadducees. He'd made them swallow their spittle, if you will, okay? And in response to another test, if you will, and I think this was a well-meaning test from one of the young scribes who would be a legal expert in the law of Moses,
in the question, what is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus summarizes Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. Check that out in your own Bible. It's not Deuteronomy 6, verse 5. And also Leviticus 19:18. Leviticus 19:18. He's referring to these basic principles that were taught way back then, all right? Now, rabbis loved to sum up the heart of religion. They just loved it. And you read some of the rabbinical writings in the Talmud and the Mishnah and other places, and you see them again and again trying to sum up, the ultimate heart of God's expectation of man. Everybody knew that Moses had given 613 commandments. We talk about the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are the Big Ten. The 10 Commandments are sort of the ultimate summary statement. But when you read through all of the law of Moses in the first 5 books of the Bible, pardon me, you see 613 commandments. Interestingly, of those 613, 365 are negative, 248 are positive. So the negative outweighs the positive. David, in Psalm 15, verses 2 to 5, Psalm 15, verses 2 to 5, read it for yourself, he reduced the commandments to 11 basic laws. Okay? Isaiah, in Isaiah chapter 33, verse 15, reduced them even further to 6. And then Micah, one of the minor prophets, as they're called, in Micah chapter 6, verse 8, he reduced these commandments to 3. Then Amos, or Amos, as we call him in Israel, in chapter 5, verse 4, he reduced it to 2. And then Habakkuk, another one of the minor prophets, in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4, reduced them to 1. Okay? And then, on top of that, you read summaries like the Golden Rule, as we call it, in Matthew 7, verse 12, and then in James 1 and 27, you've got James's summary when he says, the kind of religion that God endorses, or true religion and undefiled, is to visit orphans and widows in their distress and keep oneself unspotted from the world. And this I've taken personally. And this is why for the last almost 20 years now, my wife and I have been working with orphans and widows in sub-Saharan Africa with a ministry called WOW, Working for Orphans and Widows. And I talk about WOW now all of the time on this program because we represent WOW. We are WOW. The point being that there are any number of summaries of the law. But this summary that Jesus gives is, I think, absolutely genius. And when I continue with this next time, I'll pick up on that genius factor and I'll rely on my director and producers to remind me that that's where I'm picking up next time. Let me just say this. When James in chapter 1 verse 27 says, the kind of religion that God endorses, or pure religion and undefiled, is to visit orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. What he's doing there is saying, you need to care for your neighbor, and I'll demonstrate to you next time I teach how that refers to justice and justice seeking. The other, you need to care for the Lord. You need to love your neighbor, you need to love the Lord, and that is righteousness. And what Jesus is going to do in his response to this young lawyer is hit the sweet spot of Old Testament prophetic message, which is a call to the people of God to be in right relationship with him, righteousness, and in right relationship with neighbor, justice. You can't have one without the other. And if you say you love God and don't love your neighbor, the scripture says you're a liar. Whoa. So we've got to come to grips with this. And that's why I said off the top, I need to spend time on this. And next teaching segment, I'll pick up on it and I'll spend as much time as I need to, even going to the following.
Friends, as you know, Jim Cantelon has been offering Cantelon's Casual Commentary as a Bible study supplement to his ongoing exposition of St. Matthew's Gospel on JCT TV. He's excited to offer Volume 4, which completes the Matthew study. The Transfiguration, Triumphal Entry, Crucifixion, and Resurrection of Jesus Christ are all covered in this volume. Like the first 3 volumes, it's concise, captivating, and casual. To order your copy, you can call, write, or go online. Write to Jim Cantelon today, Post Office Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7, or call us at 519-415-8341. You can also order online at jimcantelontoday.com.
This is the last time I'm going to mention this special offer. I'm only doing it in November. I can't do it in December because if you order this in December, it won't come to you before Christmas. This can be a Christmas gift to one of your kids, all of your kids, grandkids, the boy who sang for the angels. I wrote it. It's illustrated beautifully by a young man right in the area of the studio. And it's a special Christmas story, which I think you'll really enjoy and your kids will really enjoy. It's got lots of tragedy in it, I got to warn you. A great, redeeming, happy ending. So you'll want to read it before you read it to your kids. But if you would like this, what I'm asking you to do is to give your best Christmas gift to the orphans and widows that WOW is ministering to in sub-Saharan Africa. WOW stands for Working for Orphans and Widows. Kathy and I founded it 18 years ago. And we have been working all of those years with the least of these people living in abject poverty and illness. It's a very, very important ministry. My theme has been every church of Mother Teresa, and I'm calling on the churches of Africa to care for orphans and widows. And so basic things like medicines, like food security, like blankets. You know, you're sleeping in a little mud hut with a dirt floor. A few blankets can make a big difference. Fix a roof. All these straw roofs on these little mud rondavels are leaking in one way or another. Provide a bicycle for a precious home-based care worker, in most cases widows themselves, who has to walk right now 3 or 4 hours just to visit one person. Food security for that home-based care worker. Anything and everything we do in terms of these Christmas gifts will go into home-based care. And those of you who've been ordering the Casual Commentary, Volume 4 is in now, friends. All of Matthew is available to you, 172 pages. Ask for that as well. Till next time, I'm Jim Cantelon. See you then.
Contact us. Jim Cantelon today. P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7. If you're sending a check, make it payable to Jim Cantelon today. Or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com and click Support.